When you hear the word skyscraper, a few famous monuments probably spring to mind. The Burj Khalifa, the Empire State Building, the CN Tower, the Shard, etc. These towering feats of architectural expertise are awe-inspiring to look at and will likely stand for decades to come. However, the same can't be said for the Newby McMahon building in Wichita Falls, Texas, nicknamed the world's littlest skyscraper. It stands at a measly 40 feet, approximately 12 meters tall. Now technically, a skyscraper is defined as a building that is 40 stories or higher, or over 150 meters. But we're going to let this one slide just because of the novelty of the situation. So you're probably wondering how this small southern town became home to what is essentially a meme. Well, the building was the result of one of the scummiest yet simultaneously hilarious swindles of all time. Schadenfreude, if you will. Let's backtrack to the early 1900s. In 1912, a huge oil and natural gas reserve was found underneath the city of Burkburnett. Of course, local citizens who owned the land the oil was underneath became millionaires almost instantly. Burkburnett became a so-called boom town, a word given to towns who experience sudden and unexpected economic growth. But with this economic boom came a population boom. Thousands of people flocked to the city looking for work in the oil business. And since Burkburnett didn't have the space to accommodate them, the majority of these workers ended up settling in nearby towns. One of these towns being Wichita Falls. However, Wichita Falls also wasn't prepared for this wave of migrants. In fact, with Wichita Falls being a much smaller town with poor infrastructure and industry, it struggled at first. After a while, the town began to adjust to the change. But some workers and businesses were working out of prefab buildings, shacks, and some people were even camping out in tents, hoping that they'd soon be as rich as some of the other residents of the town. The big businesses wanted new buildings that would be permanent additions to the industry office sections of the town. It was clear that the area needed a major upgrade. This is where the biggest players in this story come into play. Augustus Newby and J.D. McMahon and his construction company. Augustus Newby was a director of the Wichita Falls and Oklahoma City Railway Company. His building was already in place before J.D. McMahon came along and built another one next door. He didn't really have anything to do with the planning or construction of the building, but since his surname is part of the building's title, it seems right to briefly mention him. The true mastermind behind this debacle is J.D. McMahon. McMahon was one of the people who became incredibly rich off the back of the oil drillings and explorations in the local area. As well as being rich, he was also extremely powerful and had a lot of influence over the area. He owned his own construction firm, he himself being an educated structural engineer, and he was a petroleum landman. However, he wasn't a very nice guy. In fact, he was a bit of a scumbag, pardon my language. You see, although McMahon had already gained all of his wealth and land, he wanted more. He would exploit and manipulate any person or situation if it meant he could get a little more cash in his pocket. And that's exactly what he did when it comes to the proposed building. After announcing the planned construction of a new high-rise building, investors quickly hopped on board, hoping that the town would continue to foster multiple oil barons and their companies in the years to come. McMahon eventually collected $200,000, roughly $2,927,870 in 2020 from investors, promising them that 480 feet, 150 meters building was going to be funded with their money. And that number right there is the crux of this con. While investors thought they had signed off on a 480-foot building with one apostrophe, they'd actually signed off on a 480-inch building with two apostrophes, a 12-meter-high office block. McMahon had just cheated his investors for almost $3 million with an apostrophe. Disappointed! The building was, of course, built. Despite the fraudulent claims made by McMahon when he proposed the idea of his new office space, there were lawsuits involved. But funnily enough, the biggest case had nothing to do with the false claims that McMahon had made about the building. Instead, it was to do with the land the Newby McMahon building sat on. As it turns out, McMahon didn't ask for the previous landowner's permission to construct the offices. This just reinforced how scummy of a person McMahon really was. The smaller lawsuits from investors were not very successful, only being refunded small portions of the money they put in. The building was a massive embarrassment to the town and was quickly abandoned by businesses after only a few months of being fully operational. And after the oil tycoons moved away due to the effects of the Great Depression in 1929, there was no hope of it ever making a comeback. After the building was featured in Ripley's Believe It or Not in 1920, the landmark had gained the title the world's littlest skyscraper, a name which has stuck to this day. And now that the building is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, I don't think that nickname is going to disappear anytime soon.